Hello and welcome. Brett here with clickmill.co. I'm excited about this video because in this video, we're going to kind of put these pieces together. We've been talking about the relationship between decisions and sacrifice and resources and suffering. And so we're going to put these together. And now that we kind of understand how we make these decisions, how we can do them in such a way that we get a uh, a larger harvest in our ministries, in our Christian businesses, and just generally in our lives by making decisions in a particular way. And that's what the rest of the videos in this course are going to be about, very specific ways in which we can look at decisions and allocate those resources. But I want to start more broadly in this video and talk about the relationships between decisions, or excuse me, how to produce an outsized harvest. And so the first thing I think we have to do in order to produce a harvest or a fruit in our lives that is disproportionate, I guess, firstly, to realize you can do that. And the Bible makes that clear. The Bible says that some will produce 160 or 30 times what was sown. And, just to be clear, it's not about, being a better person. None of us are more or less worthy, but it is about glorifying God with our lives. And if I can glorify God with my life and just sort of break even, and what's it say in the passage where the testing of the building through the fire, it's build with wood, hair, straw, or gold, stone, and precious metals. Well, the wood, hay, and the straw burns up, and you kind of like dive into heaven's window as though one escaping the flames of your burning house. I would rather not be in that situation. I'd rather just have, to the best of my ability, the house with the gold, the stone, and the precious metals, and build up treasure in heaven. And so that's what we talk about when we talk about having a disproportionate or outsized harvest with our life and our ministry or our business. And how do we do that? Well, we've talked about how decisions require sacrifice and suffering. And a lot of times we've also talked about how we can pay now or we can pay later. Um, and for example, I can have all the fun I want to have now with, let's just say, finances, and I can go gambling and drinking, and I'm obviously speaking of fleshly things here, and I can go do all these ridiculous fun things from a fleshly perspective. And also, I didn't allocate those financial resources to investments that are going to pay me later. And so I'm going to play now, but I'm going to pay later because I'm going to be 80 and I'm going to be the door greeter at the local grocery store. And the alternative then is you pay now and you play later. Well, that's hard. And that kind of brings us into the first thing about reality that we're going to have to make our peace with in order to have the type of life that it looks like God is calling us to in the Bible, especially in Proverbs. One says, and one in particular says that the wise man stores up an inheritance for his children's children. And it's like, who does that? That's wild. That's hard to do. Nobody does that. And again, it's not about money, but the type of life we would have to live to have that much to play later. That's a lot of sacrifice on the front end. And so the first part of this is life is difficult. And I don't say that in a what do you want to say, pessimistic way. It's just reality. And the Bible tells us this. Life was really, really good before the fall. Adam and Eve were in this state of perfection in the garden, and God made everything perfect. And they just kind of wandered around, just tending, pruning the little leaves, and oh, well, there's all the fruit. And it was easy. But now we've got two problems that make life difficult. And that is, firstly, that the world has fallen. And so now things don't produce fruit easily like they did before. We're not in this lush, abundant garden that never runs out of fruit. We have to, work with the plants and toil over the land to get these plants to create fruit. And that's the same in your ministry and in your business. And the second problem is that Adam and Eve fell. So where they used to, like, imagine a person with perfect character, because that's what they would have had before the fall. They were people in perfect righteousness. Well, you think, what would you do with perfect character? Well, let's see. I would perfectly balance family and work, and I would wake up at 5 a.m. every day, and I would, work out, and then I wouldn't even need coffee, and then I'd work, but I would prioritize all my work the right way. And of course, when you could do that easily, fruit would just come. And that doesn't happen anymore either because we're fallen. So now you have fallen people in a fallen world that doesn't produce fruit like it did before. And is it any wonder that given both of those things, that it's hard to create a harvest, that it's hard to build a ministry or a business that grows, that you have to allocate resources in a way that requires sacrifice and suffering and a long-term focus. Like all of those things are natural consequences of the biblical narrative, the Genesis account that we see in Scripture. And so all of that brings us around to the idea that life is difficult. And again, it's not a bitter type of thing, it's just reality. If you want to do something that's that's worthwhile in the long run, you have to do a lot of things you don't want to do in the short run, and you just have to have a thick skin, thick enough to get through a lot of those things. And this is true in any area of your life. For example, at one point I read a study on marriage, and it said people who believed that marriage, what do I say, was you decided marriage based on true love, were at an outsized risk of divorce. And that makes perfect sense because, marriage is awesome. Marriage is the best thing. If you can, go into it, it makes you a better person. But they believe it's true love, and you ride into the Walt Disney sunset, and there's no effort and no work required, and the other person completes you. And these sort of false understandings of what relationship is. And those marriages don't work out at higher rates than marriages where people say, well, marriage is awesome and marriage is hard work. And marriage requires learning the other person and learning to communicate and getting through the hard times, even when you don't, feel all the things. And those people have much higher success rates in marriage. Why? Because they accept the fact that life can be difficult and they're okay with that. And so this is, and if you're looking for a reference, I would recommend a great book. It's called, let me think, um, the very first sentence of the book is Life is Difficult, and it is The Road Less Traveled. I will fair warn you again, we critical think everything we read. This does have a little bit of I believe like a Freudian approach and psychologically, which got a little bit of weird stuff in. But broadly, if you look at the book, even the first page is so good. Life is difficult. Everybody thinks they have these unique challenges that nobody else has ever had before. And he goes, basically, it's all nonsense. We all have the same problems, which pairs up with Ecclesiastes wonderfully. There's nothing new under the sun. Around and around we go, and the same problems and the same woes. And so the book, The Road Less Traveled, his point through the book is as soon as you just accept the fact that everybody has the same problems you have, the problems are normal and they're hard, and you just accept the reality the way that it is, then you can actually begin to excel because it's no longer shocking. You're no longer in this weird place where you think reality is supposed to be a different way than it actually is. Then you can begin to produce fruit. Okay, so the first point here is that reality is difficult, and that's okay because we're going to live through some difficult stuff in this world, and then we get to go to paradise in heaven with God and Jesus forever. So I'm totally happy to put in the work and develop a thick skin and deal with like, oh, this client did this and, your kids did that. And like, whatever it is, we'll deal with it. So the next thing is once you realize that the hard things are the things that we have to do, that life is just sort of difficult at times, it's also the difficult things that produce the fruit. So if you want good fruit, it's generally the harder things. Like what would be fun? It'd be super fun for me to go to the theme park every day and just spend all of our family's money on theme parks, my kids would have the greatest time. They'd think I was the best dad ever. And also, we would be broke if we just did that every day forever. So that would be unwise. Well, why? Because doing what I want right now, you pay now and you play later, or you play now going to the theme park every day. The kids would love it, but we'd be playing now, and we'd be paying later again because I'd be 80 and I'd be working at, the supermarket because I didn't do the hard thing now, which would be to be moderate and make wise decisions and put the finances in something super boring like, I don't know, stocks or bonds or mutual funds or something so that they grow over time. And so it's the harder decisions that create the growth. Okay. So this is a point on human nature. Human nature values the easy things and it doesn't like the hard things. And this is the primary reason why so many people struggle to get the growth in their life and their ministry that they want. And this is true for me. We naturally run away from the hard thing. It is against our nature. And so if you can just be the type of person who wants to do the hard things and decides that you like the stress and the challenge of doing the hard thing, you will be one of a relatively small number of people that can actually get a disproportionate fruit, you know? And so the first thing is, again, life is difficult. And the second thing is the difficult things are generally the things that produce the fruit. Waking up early every day, showing up and just doing a thing, even if you don't know how to do it, is how you learn how to do it. There's no magic sauce. You just get in the trenches and fight until you win. And as a matter of fact, I've got, you may have seen him in our apologetics class. I've got Juke here in the studio today, and he's here from Florida. So he came a very long way. He's hanging out over here. You want to say hi, Juke? You can just wave. You don't got to come, whatever you want. Yeah. Juke's here. Juke will be in our apology. Yep, they can see you. So Juke's in studio, but Juke's YouTube channel is just, he's got one channel. It took him 5 years to break 1,000, 4 or 5 years to break 1,000 subscribers. Why? He doesn't have anybody teaching him how to do YouTube. And it took him 5 years and he broke it. And then he's breaking 1,000 on 2 other YouTube videos inside of 2 months. That's why. Because you just show up, you do the hard thing, and you're okay with doing the hard thing. And so that's the next thing. And so I guess that's all 3 things. So the first thing is life is difficult. The difficult things, allocating your resources and choosing and willfully sacrificing the things that would be really fun and the ideas, we'll talk about, pickle pops. I think we already talked about pickle pops, all these, like, this is a great idea. Well, sometimes we sacrifice our great idea, and that's the hardest thing. So usually it's that hardest thing that's going to produce the fruit, and we have to be okay doing hard things. And that is the reason why so many ministry leaders struggle to get the growth that they want, because we want and we believe that, and this is what I was taught in ministry school, if you just go and you just have sugar and game nights and fun and you just play now, that somehow growth comes from that. And that is actually not how reality works. You have to do the hard thing. And what's fascinating is when I started doing the hard things right before I moved, I had to move for family health reasons. And before I moved, I started doing the hard things, and I started talking to some of the older, students that were guys, and I held them accountable. And I said, no, this behavior is not good enough anymore. If you do this kind of behavior, this is the kind of life you're going to have. And these kids, their parents were selling crack out of their windows. They're homeless, living on the beach. And I was like, is that the life you want to have? And they, no, we don't want that life. We want any life but that life. And so it's like, well, okay, you're going to have to start doing some hard things. And they were terrified. And we got them jobs, we got them all kinds of stuff, and they just started flourishing because I told them to do the hard thing, but then they understood that the hard thing got them the life that they wanted. And that's the same thing with your ministry and your business and the relationship between decisions and growth. When you make the hard decisions, when you make the decisions that put off the reward into the future, the reward in the future gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's true both in this life and in the next. We store up our treasure in heaven, where our heart is, there our treasure is also. And so the decisions that are difficult are the ones, if you're just thinking, I need a model in my mind for making decisions, if it's easy, probably don't do it. And if it's hard, probably do that. And again, that is a very broad, and that's not going to apply to everything, but based on human nature, the hard things get the growth. And when we make decisions and we allocate our resources, we should be the thing we go, we don't want to do that. That's probably the thing you should start with considering. So hopefully that helps to kind of start bringing all of this together with the sacrifices and the suffering and the resources. Growth, it comes directly from the more difficult action. So in the next videos, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. We're going to get into actually how to start making biblical decisions, factoring in both the faith and the spiritual aspects of things, which we don't focus on too much in these courses. But given that these things are so closely tied in this course, I am going to address it, and then also go through a bunch of models for making decisions in a wise, and what do you want to say? We are in the world, but not of the world. So in the sense that we have to understand how the world works. If God isn't telling you to do something that makes no sense, then we should probably have some models of understanding the world and then making wise, godly decisions when the decisions are in our sphere of influence and God says, you make the best call. So we're going to talk more about that in future videos. I'll look forward to seeing you there. God bless.